Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Tensions were really high going into the recent meeting between President Zelensky, European leaders, and Donald Trump. Donald Trump came in from his meeting with Putin, and there was some very supposedly aggressive rhetoric from Trump coming into this conversation. A lot of people were expecting that we might see a repeat of the Oval Office disaster that happened earlier this year. However, the results were very clearly much different than before. And this is where I need to acknowledge that I was completely wrong. I thought that this meeting will be a general exchange of pleasantries, and in all, the Trump's administration will try to pressure Zelensky on giving away territories, as it was supposedly outlined, and Zelensky will just say no. They will not say it in any hostile fashion, but everyone will come out thinking that they had a good time, and generally speaking, that's about it. However, this is not what happened. The heavyweight politics really put me in my place. We had recently battlefield situation in Ukraine where Russians kind of rapidly tried to advance north of Pokrovsk, and then Ukrainians just completely undercut that offensive, and they just cut it in half and destroyed and captured a lot of prisoners, and it was a complete disaster for Russians, so they turned it around. This was pretty much the same thing, except politically. So let's dive in and go step by step and how Ukraine and Europeans were able to score big victories when the expectations were that this is going to be, at the best, just coming back in neutral. Firstly, we need to acknowledge that this is Donald Trump we're speaking of, so a lot of things that is happening with Donald Trump, he can have a change of his opinion tomorrow and everything can go out the window. With that said, we're more interested in what President Zelensky did and in what European leaders did, and what was the behind-the-scenes outcomes that we got of all of this. And first and foremost, we need to acknowledge how super trained were both the European leaders and President Zelensky. President Zelensky started the meeting super nicely. He explained and said thank you to Trump's wife, Melania, that she sent a letter to Putin asking him to release the children from the captivity, those that he stole from Ukraine, to get them back to Ukraine. And President Zelensky handed over to Donald Trump the letter from his wife saying thank you for that, for being such a kind person, and so on. And that is a very nice mood setter. Beyond that, President Zelensky also handed over to Trump something that really buttered him up for any kind of conversation. It was a custom-made golf club by the Ukrainian sergeant Konstantin Kartavetsev. And we actually have a response video from Donald Trump to that sergeant. Have a listen.
Konstantin, first of all, I just watched your swing. I know a lot about golf, and your swing is great. It looks beautiful, and you're going to be a very good golfer very soon. But I also want to thank you for this putter. It's beautiful, and it's made with real love, and it's given to me with real love from you, and I appreciate that. I have great respect for you. You're an amazing person, and you just keep playing golf and doing all of the other things. Your country is a great country. We're trying to bring it back to health, and your president is working very hard to make it that way. So, again, I want to thank you. Keep swinging, and the putter is beautiful. I'll use it. Every time I sink a putt, I'll be thinking about you. Thank you, Konstantin. Good.
And that was just the beginning, because diplomatic heavyweights figured out Trump and they started doing everything. The press conference went without major issues. There were questions asked to Zelensky, and basically he did what he was supposed to do at the first time. He gave non-answers, which is totally fine, because it's all about the show. It's all about by giving Donald Trump the platform to talk about things. It's all about nodding to him, and this is actually working. And after that, President Zelensky and Donald Trump went into the behind closed doors to talk more privately. And this was great. And President Zelensky actually shared some of the things that they were talking about. I recently reposted basically the argument from President Zelensky and Deep State is what they did is they visually showed Donald Trump the situation on the ground. Because what we need to understand is Donald Trump, I'm not sure if he can find Ukraine on the map, but he definitely can visually process information and he likes it. We already know that. And what President Zelensky showed is basically this map, except you're looking at this map and you're thinking, wow, this is the current map of Ukraine, except it's not current map of Ukraine. This is a map of Ukraine right after Ukrainian failed counteroffensive. This is the current map of Ukraine. And the point that Zelensky was making is that when Putin, especially, or anyone else talks that Russia is controlling 19% of Ukraine, they are lying just a little bit about the capabilities of the Russian military. Because when you look at this map, and then you look at this map, and in the last 1,000 days, Russia was able to capture less than 1% of Ukraine. And he reiterated the losses that Russia sustained. He reiterated even relevant intelligence references to his own staff and commissions, though there is varying things of estimating Russian capabilities here. But the point of the matter is that Zelensky was prepared. He was doing the talking points that were appealing to Trump. He was flattering. He said thank you many, many times to Trump. He brought in presents. He handled it like it was a professional serve. And he did not step back on anything that was pushed from the Putin's administration. Those same patterns that Putin repeated coming into this meeting. And here it's important to acknowledge that while I myself also think that Trump is favoring Putin, and there's a lot of people that I follow that agree on that, the meeting that Trump had with Putin was not as one-sided as we assume it was. And I was outlining this when I talked about what was happening during the Sunday review. And specifically, Axios has reported on some details from that meeting that actually paint the picture that that meeting with Putin didn't go that well at all. And we already kind of knew that it didn't go well because there was canceled an extended discussion. They were canceled to lunch together. But Axios shed some light. Firstly, what is the plan of Trump's administration? In simple terms, he wants to talk with Putin, ask what Putin is supposed to give way essentially for, like what is his conditions to stop doing what he's doing. Then try to talk with Ukraine and maybe pressure Ukraine and what Ukraine can kind of give way to and talk to, and then put them together in the same room, and then they will agree on something. That is their plan. Like, you can argue in the comments section how good this plan is and what results it will bring. But that is the plan. But most importantly, in the meeting with Trump, he talked with Putin. And obviously Trump said swapping territories and other things when it was expected. And he was really hoping that Putin is just like, he just needs to talk with Trump to find that real thing, what he actually good for. But it didn't went that way. Putin reiterated his maximalist demands. He said he wants everything that Ukraine has been written into Russian constitution. He wants Ukraine demilitarized. He wants Ukraine to have no military. He wants essentially all of these bullshit arguments that were stated from before. He said that this is what I want. And Trump was so mad that he almost walked out from this. Like, he was really frustrated with Putin because he thought, now that we met face to face, clearly we can come to some reason, because he just doesn't understand this absolute obsession that Putin has with just destroying Ukraine and having Ukraine. He doesn't get that. And Putin here blinked. Like, this is something that I feel is underreported. Putin caved. He said, yes, okay, maybe then we don't need any Zaporizhia region or any Kherson region. And Trump, this is where the moment says, like, okay, like, I'm still not happy. You're still asking Ukraine to give Donbass as a principal territory, but at least there is something for me. But he was still mad. So all of that show stating there was a 10 out of 10 meeting, that it was really, really good, it is all for show. This is all for cameras. In reality, no real good deal with Russians and no really warm discussions with Putin and the whole delegation on cooperation with the United States. And then the meeting with the European leaders started, and European leaders, every single one of them, used some kind of tactic. They knew and tried to essentially get to Donald Trump with certain aspects of things, trying to get him to understand that they're completely behind Ukraine. And here is important that I've heard some analysts report, but not everyone, because this is the key. They've outlined the vision that basically the whole Europe is going for in agreement with Ukraine, the minimalist vision for Ukraine. And that is fantastic. That is one of these arguments, and or the accumulation of those really help to bring down the Trump wall, at least in a sort of a political sense. Because not only we heard that there is some possibility to provide Ukraine with some security guarantees, but more importantly is not what was happening in the room with Trump and Zelensky, but what was happening in other rooms. Because delegations of Europeans and Ukrainians, they didn't come just by themselves on the highest level. They brought in their economic and military advisors and heads of those respective areas, and they talked with American ones, and they started making offers to Americans. And Trump loves offers. His administration loves offers. And that is where all of the security guarantees things started appearing. Suddenly we hear that US might help Europe with the deployment of troops in Ukraine. How would this work? France and UK, I critique them that their deployment, but when you put it in a whole picture, that actually makes a lot of sense. Europe basically convinced Trump politically that they will be taking charge, but they do need things from United States because United States is the best, and they just need the help from United States. But it will be not free help, it will be a favor, because what they do is essentially get US richer. This is the way to go. The discussion of the security guarantees for Ukraine, besides what Europeans will be doing with Ukraine, we don't know the full aspects of it. But from the American side, they are stating, let us set a deal where Ukraine and the Europeans are going to buy 100 billion in weapons from United States. We will also make a deal with the Ukrainian advanced drone industry for 50 billion to supply US with drones. And beyond that, Europeans will provide NATO Article 5-like guarantees, but US will need to support these troops with intelligence and logistics, something that doesn't really require presence of a lot of the US troops. They can just help with logistics on like until the border or something. And the main aspect is Ukrainian military. If you ask me what security guarantees Ukraine needs, is it the NATO armies? I mean, that would be good. But first and foremost, weapons. 100 billion in weapons, that is fantastic. But more importantly, if this is security guarantees NATO-like, if this is Article 5, and I'll explain why Article 5 NATO-like. Because you might think it's like, well, NATO would be better. And I agree, but it's a principal position for Russia, right? So we can work around this because that's what the Coalition of the Willing is stating. Coalition of the Willing is stating that for Ukraine, we will provide a mutual NATO Article 5-like agreement, which is basically NATO, except Ukraine will not be as part of NATO. It will be a NATO 5 agreement with the countries that they trust together, because getting Ukraine into NATO, while there is Hungary and there is other countries that don't like Ukraine, at least their politicians, and can shill for Russia, can be problematic. But if Ukraine just makes agreements with United Kingdom, Poland, the Baltics, the Nordics, I mean, isn't that the main players anyway? And then the coalition of the willing will send their forces and their instructors to absolutely unify the NATO structures with Ukrainian structures. That is why they were there. So Ukraine will be de facto member of, well, not full NATO, but all of this basically smaller NATO. Plus, they get support from US because they're going to buy weapons and rearm, massively rearm Ukrainian armed forces. And the 100 billion is only from US. The rest can be coming from either Europeans or the Ukrainian manufacturing altogether. And most important, to underscore that Trump was indeed interested in this, is that Europeans sold him off that Ukraine must become a member of the European Union because Ukraine is at least politically integrated into European Union. And I shit you not, I was sitting there jaw locked open when I read that Trump called Viktor Orban and said to Orban, can you stop blocking Ukraine EU accession? The change and the ability of the European, like this is not just like one person or like a delegation of people. This is on all levels of the heavyweight political diplomacy. This was a frontal attack, and it's like a breakthrough. It's something that absolutely crushed this negotiation day on levels, both in the highest levels, but also in the committee levels, trying to convince Americans that, you know, it's like we can just buy weapons from you, logistics, which kind of logistics you would be okay with, like how would the Trump's administration want this? Like you can supply us this, we can supply you that, we're going to take the charge, we are already more contributing to NATO, and making every single argument in the book. I was stunned. I was just purely stunned on how impressive that performance from the Europeans and Ukrainians were and how single-front it was. And a lot of this convinced Trump that, yes, the Europeans and Ukrainians are there. They obviously are trying to sell that there is still a path forward talking with Putin, but we are way, way, way away from any kind of Ukraine just needs to give away land to Putin. And again, I will repeat that Trump can change his mind, but most important, now it's not just Trump. These negotiations are happening on senator levels. These negotiations are happening in committee levels. It is fantastic. Like if you know someone that was preparing this act, this campaign, like let them reach out to me. I would love to hear this story. Fantastic news, guys. The Ukrainian-European plan, it does assume that the minimal condition would be that it would be essentially West Germany, East Germany delimitation of Ukraine, that the Russian-controlled territory will not be officially recognized like the Baltics or something. And then hopefully once Putin is changed in Russia, then maybe they will try to settle this matter diplomatically. And this is a Ukrainian position. This has been Ukrainian position all along. So there is absolutely no downside to this. Europeans have been doing a fantastic job. They understood Trump and Trump's administration hundreds of times better, and they really proven to me that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I will be from now on a lot more careful. But this is one time where I'm very happy that I was wrong. Guys, let's follow the news together. Stay up, stay tuned, subscribe to the channel. I love you. Trust in Ukrainian armed forces. Support the Ukrainian armed forces. And I will see you next time.